In Scripture, we often read the names of minor characters and we skip past them, but perhaps if we read more deeply, we find they have an important message. This morning, Rob is going to perform a monologue based on a character who's referenced in 3 of the Gospels and is aimed at giving a dramatic presentation to convey something of what it might have been like to follow Jesus as he carried the cross, was crucified and then resurrected. It's approximately 16 minutes in length. The heart of this drama is to honour the Lord Jesus.
Good morning. Have any of you been on a journey that's really changed your life? I'm very keen this morning to share with you a journey that transformed my life. We had been travelling to Jerusalem for several weeks. I was with my wife and our 2 boys, Rufus and Alexander. We were in Jerusalem for Passover, and on that day we planned to bring a lamb without spot or blemish to sacrifice, to remember how our God set our people free from slavery in Egypt. We were very committed to bringing up Rufus and Alexander in the way of Torah, the Holy Scriptures, and to come as a family to worship our God in Jerusalem. My name, Simon. I came from Cyrene, in a place that you would call Libya. We came from a Hebrew community there. Well, we heard it before we could see it. Then as we entered through the Jerusalem gate, we saw Roman soldiers, a loud, jeering crowd, and a glimpse of a man carrying a cross. What was he guilty of, we wondered. As we moved closer, we saw him, a wounded and bloodied man, staggering under the weight of the cross, surrounded by people, priests and elders, all mocking. I was shocked by the priests and the elders. Transfixed by the scene before me, I left my family and I squeezed through the crowd. I then saw the weeping woman following close behind. The crowd close to him were mocking and spitting on him. I watched him as he staggered under the weight of that cross. He collapsed. His body, no doubt, in a state of shock from the wounds that I could see. He stood again with some determination and continued his journey. His head bloodied from a crown of thorns dug into his skull. His beard ripped from his bleeding and swollen face. His clothing clung to numerous wounds all over his back, his legs and arms clearly shredded from a vicious Roman whipping. He paused his journey and he turned to the weeping woman. The crowd went silent. "Daughters of Jerusalem," he said, "weep not for me, weep rather for yourselves and for your children." And he spoke of troubled times, but I did not understand what he meant. Neither did I understand how he had the strength and the compassion at this time to be concerned for them. He turned back to his journey. He walked a number of steps and then collapsed again on the ground. We waited a few moments. Suddenly, a soldier's whip cracked to my side. "Carry his cross," he commanded. I had got too close. "I will be unclean for Passover." The whip cracked again. "We've been travelling for weeks. the whip cracked again and tore into my leg, and my words became a cry of pain. I would not celebrate Passover this year. Would I become a criminal like this man? The crowd were now silent again, and all eyes were on me. I walked slowly over toward him, my pain nothing compared to his. Our eyes connected. Such depth. Perhaps the only part of him not inflicted with wounds. I bent down and I lifted the cross off his back. Now feeling the warm, damp blood and sweat on the wood. I took the cross and positioned it on my back, and he slowly stood. Then the soldiers commanded us to move. He staggered forward, and I followed in his footsteps. Now hearing and feeling the renewed jeers of the crowd, I felt the rejection. I felt the shame. I wanted to hide my face. I felt tremendous fear. Would I be crucified like this man? To be crucified was to be cursed. My family knew that. I could see them, tears streaming down their faces. Why me? And who was this man? Well, I heard his name. Yeshua. Jesus in your language. His fame had spread to Cyrene. I heard he'd performed many miracles. He'd given sight to the blind. He'd reached out and touched the rejected. He'd fed thousands and taught thousands. I'd even heard he'd raised someone from the dead. Many had thought him to be the Messiah, the hope of Israel. So why was he staggering before me today? As we walked, the words of Isaiah drifted into my mind. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter, and he opened not his mouth. It felt like a long journey to that place of crucifixion. If that's what it felt like for me, what did it feel like for him? Suddenly, the cross was lifted off my shoulders. I would not be crucified that day. But as I looked at Yeshua, who had no such release, I felt connected. I squeezed back through the crowd into my family, and we held on to one another, and I wept. We needed to leave so I could get clean. I had the blood of a man, blood of Christ on my clothing. A man I'd never met. But we stayed. We were drawn. We stayed near the weeping woman. Mary, his mother, was there. Her tears now dried on her grief-stricken face. Near her, a man, John, a disciple, the only disciple. We heard him refuse the sour wine and myrrh to dull the pain. We heard the agonizing cries as the nails went in. And then he was lifted up between two others. Some priests and teachers of the law called out, "He saved others, but he can't save himself." Not a hint of kindness. Not a hint. And from the cross came the words, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." Incredible. In such pain and rejection, he forgave. There were two others crucified there that day. One mocked like the crowd. The other called out, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." Kingdom. How can a man sure to die have a kingdom? And yet above him, the words, "King of the Jews." And his reply, "Today you will be with me in paradise." Time drifted. We heard him call out to John to care for his mother. I can't imagine what she felt like at that time. Meanwhile, the soldiers were arguing over his outer garments. Then came those agonizing words that I will never forget. "Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani." My God, why have you forsaken me?" And the world went dark. We should have gone. But where could we go now in this strange darkness? We held on to one another. The darkness lasted for some time. We heard him cry out in thirst. And then came his last words. He gave his spirit to the Father and then cried out, "It is finished!" And he was gone. We were thrown to the ground by a violent earthquake. A massive tearing sound ripped across the valley from the temple. Rocks nearby cracked open with a mighty sound. And we all cried out in terror and fear. Our fear gradually became awe. And I heard the centurion at the foot of the cross say, "Surely he was the Son of God." As we left, I had so many questions. What was finished? We stayed in Jerusalem, perplexed, confused, lost. Perhaps most of Jerusalem was the same. Then came that morning, after the Sabbath. We were woken by an earthquake. And that day there were whispers across Jerusalem that a group of women had seen him in a garden. Then rumors spread that he, Yeshua, was alive. The tomb was empty, and the priests and teachers of the law were in a panic. How could this be so? I had seen him die. We searched Jerusalem to find him or his disciples. We needed the truth. And as we searched, My footsteps became heavy. I had a reluctance in my heart. Did I really want to find him? Did I really want the truth? We met with those who were close to him. I was shocked by what they told me. At the same time, so humbled. Now I knew why. My sin. Our sin. It took him to the cross. You will understand why on that day I had been reluctant to carry his cross. And so for me, it took time to process, to comprehend the love that had walked before me that day. But I came to understand. I came to believe. I came to understand that he chose to lay down his life for me. God himself had provided our Passover lamb and set us free from our slavery to sin. And the most incredible, amazing thing of all was that Yeshua was alive. He'd risen. The grave was empty. He'd conquered death. The lives of my family and I were transformed. We had a new beginning. And his arms of love are held out to each and every one. His scars, I believe they will be the only scars we will see in all of heaven. I will never forget that agonizing cry that day. My God, why have you forsaken me? And our sin was somehow placed upon him, and our punishment as well. The Father turned his back in judgment. And Yeshua, Jesus, the true light of the world, hung there in emptiness and deep loneliness. His heart broken. And it finally crushed him. If there had been another way, God would have found it. And why did he do it? Have you felt rejection, failure, being alone, guilty? Through faith in Yeshua and his death and resurrection, there was an exchange at the cross. There is forgiveness for sin. There is love for rejection. There is healing for a broken heart. Now I knew what was finished, the work of salvation. My sin lifted off me just as the cross was lifted off me that day. Sure, I still had some struggles and trials in life, but they had a new purpose. My heart was now at peace with God, and my heart was at peace with myself. Only God could do that. I do not believe for a better life. I am a Hebrew. I know the Hebrew scriptures, and they all point to him. 700 years before, Isaiah the prophet spoke of the servant. You can read it in chapter 53 of his book. He was marred beyond all human likeness. I saw that fulfilled. 1,000 years before, King David prophetically spoke of the cross before it had even been invented. Read his psalm, number 22. My God, why have you forsaken me? I heard that fulfilled. When I met with the disciples, they understood why I had been reluctant to carry his cross that day. They themselves had run, had deserted their friend and rabbi. But we have the most incredible story to tell. And so they included my name in their gospel stories. You'll find it in Matthew and Mark and Luke. And people of that day would come and ask me and my family what we saw and what we heard. We were witnesses to the most incredible story in all of history. Did not Paul speak of my family in his letter to the Church of Rome? Brett Rufus, chosen of the Lord, and his mother, who's become a mother to me too. For the kingdom is a family. Are you part of this kingdom? Church attendance, some vague hope of being good enough. It's really just a puff of wind. Redemption, salvation, is only found through faith in Yeshua and his death and resurrection. The thief on the cross. Such simple words of faith. Remember me when you come into your kingdom. He's returning soon. He is the King of Kings. And this broken world will be transformed. It will be glorious. Do you hear his voice speaking in your heart today? Come on this journey. It will transform your life.